All right. So again, I want to welcome everyone webinar series Gray Divorce. And today's topic is a very important topic, moving forward with dignity, stability, and boundaries. So I want to welcome everyone here tonight and thank you for joining us. So we're going to talk a little bit about me before we get started. Um, my name is attorney Cherise Williams. So hello, everyone. I'm the principal attorney and owner of the law office of Cherise L. Williams. I'm licensed in Maryland and the District of Columbia, and I do collaborative divorce. Do trial litigation divorce, custody, child support, you name it, under the child support umbrella, under the family law umbrella. I do prenuptials and postnuptial negotiations, and I thoroughly enjoy helping families through these difficult times. And these are times you need to make strategic decisions. So I work with successful, high achieving individuals who see clarity, privacy, and a forward looking approach. And I wanted to, let everyone know that this webinar is for educational purposes only, and it doesn't create an attorney-client relationship. If you would like to discuss that and your personal situation, you can call 240-499-8569 or visit my website. And we'll have more of that on the very last tab. So a couple of housekeeping things as we go along with this webinar that's very important. So in the chat, you'll be able to communicate with one another, and I encourage you to do that if you do in fact want to talk about the topic, you've had experience with this topic. If you have questions in particular, please put them in the chat. I'll look for them so that these are things that I can answer at the end. Some people pre-submitted questions, so that'll also be great. I'm going to try to spend at least 22 to 20 minutes on the actual context, the substance of the content of this webinar, and then answer the questions at the end. And it is being recorded, so you'll have an opportunity to see this again when I post it. So just be looking out for that. And again, I'll give you more information on that as we proceed at the end. All right. So let's get into the substance of why we're here today. Why divorce over 55 feels different. So as you noticed, I put the word gray divorce in the title, and I'm not doing that to, have anyone feel offended. You may be 55 and you may not have a gray hair in your head, and that's great. It's just a terminology used for people that are generally 55 is the age I use. Some people in my profession and other professions that deal with people that are going into their senior years may use a different age, but I feel like that is an age when you are thinking about things in your life. And when that comes to employment, you just have different issues. So you have different issues that come up when you're divorcing. And so it's super important that this particular subsection of people are looked at and helped in a different way. So at that age, you might be reimagining what the next chapter of your life is going to look like when you're 55 and older. So divorce does hit differently. So looking at that next chapter, the things that you may have to encompass are splitting up a long-term relationship. Think about it. If you've been married 20, 30, 40 years, there's more at stake emotionally, legally, and financially. So you're not dividing these youthful dreams. You're protecting everything that you've built. And that includes things that are complex, retirement plans and investments. Businesses may have been in your family for decades. You may have a bank account, savings and checking, vehicles, jewelry, artwork. There may be property that you have some deep emotional value to you or your spouse. And obviously, a lot of gray divorce have adult children who may be involved emotionally or financially. You may even have grandchildren, and some people are fortunate enough to even have great grandchildren. So people are tied in more complex ways. And so it is super important that, and you also may have family heirlooms that you're thinking about. So at this pivotal point in your life, you deserve a process that honors those experiences and helps you move forward with confidence. So finding legal representation that is sensitive to this is part of what you should be considering when you're going through the motions of a divorce. So looking at not starting over, but moving forward. So it's super important. And that's why I wanted to talk about this and, make sure that there's information that you can think about. If you know someone, or if you're in this category of special people. So the next thing I wanted to discuss is how people look at their retirement, real estate, and other legal protections. So in looking at the gray divorce population, there are three common factors. One of those factors is spousal support. So the court weighs the marriage, the length, the earning power, the contributions to the household, and health. And in this instance, you can work with experts to structure agreements, and some of them might be fixed terms, sometimes modifiable, tailored to your real needs. We also look at retirement accounts. Those retirement accounts, you may be dividing up 401ks, IRAs, or pensions. And this isn't simple. You may need to use what's considered a quadro, which that's an order that's very specific to dividing up retirement accounts without tax consequences. And then you may need to have use of a financial person who can help you split these things and make sure that these accounts are handled in the manner that they're supposed to. It's often required in these instances. So I've had clients work with a financial person who can saw a big difference in how they could project their retirement income and how they could adjust the percentages. So there's just a lot that you may have to deal with and should be considered. We can also look at the family home. Should we sell, refinance, or retain? So looking at the real estate, what happens to the home? Do you sell it, refinance it, transfer it? So this could affect your tax, your credits, your emotional well-being. Some people are super attached to their homes, and some wanted to give it away as inheritance. So to me, the best approach is, if you're cash strapped, maybe to either sell it or let the other spouse buy you out. So I've had a case where we've used staggered buyout payments, where one party refinances in phases, or then they pay in phases, excuse me. So that could help both move on more smoothly. So there's just a lot of different ways that your family home or real estate in general can be handled. And so you need to have those discussions and plan out. And especially if you were going to give your real estate in your inheritance, this changes when you're getting divorced. This could change, I should say. So how you go about handling that is an important conversation to have. One thing is going through the court system and trial. If you can't decide, they will certainly sell your home. So if you're in a position where you do want to keep the home and have it still remain an inheritance, especially if it's paid off, then it's better to settle your case yourself, because then you can make accommodations so that it does stay in the family and that you can leave it as an inheritance as long as both spouses agree to that. So you want to maintain control if you're in the gray divorce population, because you have a lot that you need to potentially divide up, and you don't want to leave it to a judge to be the one to decide your life's worth of assets and debts, if you have those. We also can talk about legal protections, legal documents. So you may have to update the wills that you've created, update your power of attorneys. You may have to update healthcare directors. So divorce itself certainly doesn't automatically update your will, your power of attorney, and any beneficiary designations you may have, like for your retirement or other plans, life insurance, or things like that. So looking at a process like collaborative divorce is something that could help you, and all those things can be talked about and how you handle those things post-divorce. So it's important, again, that these things are brought up, because some people don't think about it And I've had clients who did not update their life insurance beneficiaries. And when they passed away, they're married to someone else, but their old spouse is getting the life insurance. So it is important to have those conversations and have an attorney who, or a financial person who may give you reminders, because this is an area that is super important for anyone, but particularly for people in the gray divorce category. You've worked hard to build that stability that you have. So you want to use a process that allows for a thoughtful plan to protect your long-term interests. So now that we talked about some of the property issues that come up and some of the life issues that come up, we're going to now talk about navigating your adult children and family dynamics. And if you don't have children, that's okay too. But so this isn't to exclude population of gray divorce choose not to have kids. So if you don't, this may not apply to you, but you still may have friends, and you could think of this in a similar way, because people who divorce sometimes have to figure out whose friends are staying with who. But when it comes to those adult children, it is important that you are not you're not gonna have those kids are still gonna feel the emotional effects of this particular divorce. Although you're not doing a parenting plan or a custody agreement, they are often looking at the change to their family, so it does impact them. So you want to keep them informed, but you don't want to burden them. You don't want to use them as your emotional trauma dumping is the word, emotional baggage that you're trauma dumping on them. And I say that because it's important to have your own therapeutic support. And you don't want your adult kids to have to choose sides. It's still something where they have allegiance to both of you, and they shouldn't have to decide which parent they want to maintain a strong relationship with post divorce. I mean, they're an adult, they'll choose, but it shouldn't be you pushing them in either direction. So avoid putting them in the middle. So don't share every detail. Again, they may be your best friend. They're an adult, so you feel like I can have an adult conversation. But at times, this is also the same thing. It's just in a different way of saying you're putting them in a position where they have to make decisions or give advice that may be negative about the other parent. So that's something that you should do with your friends. If you're religious, your religious support or a therapist. And then also, you don't want to overshare about your finances. Now, there are people in the great divorce population that this is not avoidable. I mean, that they can't avoid this because their kids may be heavily involved in their financial situation. They may even have power of attorney in some instances. So it just depends on your situation. But if you don't need to involve them and they're not already handling your finances, then you could allow you and your spouse with the team that you're working with for the divorce, if you do choose collaborative, to handle that so that there's no inclusion or decisions made that they feel like, oh, you did favoritism here and there. So it just further divides the family, and it shouldn't be part of your process. You want to let the kids know that this remains between you and the love that you will continue to have for them, even though they're adults. So you don't want to blame the other parent and deciding that you made a decision. You may be emotionally hurt, but it's better to utilize an outside source. So if you do choose to use a collaborative divorce process, just know that you have that emotional support and professionals to guide you through those difficult transitions. And it is because if you've been married more than half your life, for some people, this is really going into an area that they've never experienced before. They may have been the spouse who never had to actually clean or cook. They may have been the spouse who had the stay-at-home spouse. So they literally will have to think about, okay, well, how do I live by myself? Do I need to hire someone to clean my house for me? And that's okay if you're at that age and you have the resource to do that. Do I need to have meal service delivered? You need to think about all of the things that may come post divorce because of the roles that you chose to take in your marriage. Then you may have the spouse who was a stay-at-home spouse. They've never paid a bill. Some people don't even know what the bills were in the home because the other spouse took care of them. So now you need to be more financially savvy. You may have to get involved with an accountant and a financial person who can walk you through what it's like setting up a bank account and understanding how to balance that account and file, the things that come with being independent now. And so sometimes people rely on their kids because they trust them, but not all kids want that. Adult kids want that responsibility. So just know your family, know what they want to help with or what they don't. And if you're in a position to hire people to help you, there are services now more than ever that can do that. I do have access and conversations and professionals that I know that specifically do those services. So if you were to come to my office, I could refer you to those people if you're in that situation. So these are things that are super important. And in the gray divorce population, there's something to consider and talk about in the divorce process. So the collaborative divorce process, if you were to utilize it, you can have mental health professionals who help navigate, again, the conversations, and the lawyer is there to help support. So you want to preserve your relationships, not drive them further apart, especially at this point in your life. So the next thing we're going to talk about is why collaborative divorce offers a better path. So when we think about collaborative divorce, we're talking about a process. You're still getting a divorce, but it's the process to divorce that it makes, and it's collaborative, which means the parties are working together. That means you are working with your spouse, even if you're not fully getting along and you may feel all types of emotions. It's totally normal. It's totally valid. This process is not to pretend that nobody hurt one another or there's not deep sorrow, sadness, depression, all of the things. But instead of looking at each other and trying to figure out who can get over on the other, who can take what from the other, you're looking at how do I divide or have an equitable division of my assets in the way that I choose. So instead of utilizing a year process that you can, if you went through the court system in Maryland, it takes about a year. DC, similar, it just depends on the calendar, but you can expect at least 9 months to a year. Some go longer. Collaborative divorce, before you would even go into a courtroom, you're doing everything out of court. This is a settlement process, keyword settlement. So you're starting out knowing that you're committed to settlement. So in looking at it from that lens, you're going to be actually working with the lawyer. You have to hire a collaborative lawyer. I'm trained to do that. Then the other spouse has to have a lawyer. So this is not a process that one side can be represented in the other, and they both have to be collaborative lawyers. So generally speaking, I would refer your spouse to another collaborative lawyer that I work with, and they would hire that person working with that collaborative partner, and they would represent the other spouse. We would then set up the rest of the team. So for this grade population, usually a financial neutral would be assigned, and that person would be responsible for looking at the outlook of all your finances, your assets, your debts, and looking at the things that we talked about in the prior slide. If you have premarital things, if you have family heirlooms, I mean, everything that you would want to consider. And they can also design what you need for post-divorce life. So how are you going to look in your financial picture in the future? So you get to have these numbers looked at, and then the team can come up with an agreement that allows both parties to walk away with dignity, pride, and some feeling like they're not going to be destitute or without the stuff that they earned as a couple. So everything stays private, which is a great benefit to this process. You're not in the courtroom, you're not exchanging documents through the court. So therefore, you can keep your financial records and everything that happened. If there's someone was unfaithful, there's new spouse, there's all types of reasons people divorce. So those things don't have to be on public display in the court record. You can talk about them in the meeting. And another team member that's often utilized is a coach that handles the mental health part. So they're not going to be your therapist individually. They're actually someone that works to help the team communicate, and you all communicate and deal with the emotions that come with divorce. Divorce is mental, it's legal, and it's financial. There's 3 aspects, and you shouldn't ignore any of those when you're going through the process. So all of them have different things that are going to happen at different points in the process. So looking at the team and what you need. This is a very effective way for high achieving, great divorce individuals, and it's cost effective, which is what I think most of you want to hear. Even though you have other team members, it may sound like it's not cost effective, but because you're controlling the process, you're meeting, you're talking, it cuts the time in half and it achieves the uncontested or mutual consent divorce that you may have already heard, because that's what people commonly know when they think of irreconcilable differences. People, that's the grounds for divorce, and then uncontested. But in order to have that, you need a marriage separation agreement. This process is the settlement process that is designed to get you to the marital separation agreement. And once you have that, then you're now in a position to have the true uncontested divorce that is much shorter. That year cuts down to 3 months, 4 months, if that. So it could even go faster depending on the courthouse in Maryland. So that's a very important aspect of it. So that is definitely a better path that anyone can choose instead of the litigated process. So let's talk about the emotional health and planning your next chapter. I'm going to go a little deeper into the mental part that I just described about going through a divorce. It is so normal to, when you're ending a long marriage, you're going to have an emotional feeling associated with that. And if you don't, maybe you checked out years ago, and that's okay too. But for those who have that emotional connection, it's okay to grieve. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to know that you may be making a choice that's right for you. And you may second guess it. Some may feel relief, but that's where it's important to think about a therapist or some type of counselor, or whether that's someone in your religious background, whatever you need to do to transition and have that mental health support. Have your friend groups, things that take you in a place where you can feel your emotions. And so give yourself permission to feel that. But you also want to plan what's next. And you want to ask yourself, what kind of life do I want to build next? Are you going to be downsizing or relocating? Because that may be necessary when you sell your house. You may not need a 5 bedroom, 6 bedroom house or 10 bedroom house. You may not need the backyard and all the things that you had previously, because you're going to be living there potentially by yourself. And so it's okay to think about, where do I want to go next? You may not even want to be in the same state or city anymore. That's okay. So how you manage your household, we talked about that earlier, about the facts of who's going to be handling what task around the house, because you still have to manage this household, you still have to manage your finances. So again, all of those things are super important to think about. Are you going to travel and reconnect with friends? And that may be something you weren't able to do depending on the type of marriage you had. Maybe your spouse was controlling in other ways, or you just didn't feel that you could, or whatever reason. It's a good time to figure out what you enjoy and new hobbies, try new things. You may want to go take a dance class. You may want to go bowling. You may, what are things that you wanted to do in your life that you never got to do? And everybody's idea of what is fun is their idea. You may just want to be home reading the paper, reading new books, whatever it is. That's something important to keep your mind occupied and, keep yourself ready for that next chapter. So there's also the idea of financial freedom or new goals. Some people afterwards may not be financially stable in the first 2 years after a divorce, but what does it look like for you now that your assets are going to be separated, and what are the goals that you're going to set for yourself in handling your finances, if that's something that you want. There's this issue of alimony, spousal support that we talked about before, because with these marriages, it often is something that is issued, because if you're the stay-at-home spouse, you generally would not have had income of your own, and you're not going to normally go back into the workforce. So it's only fair that you would have the ability to survive and live. So indefinite alimony are higher in marriages that are 35 and 45 years and up. So that could be something you negotiate and decide what is a reasonable amount to live off of. If you're high income earners, you have built a lot of assets, and the clients that I've represented, that's the case. So then, yes, there is this idea that the person is not going to then go from a mansion to living in poverty and they have to get government assistance. That's just not realistic or right. So that's just how you're going to have to look at how you go about separating the assets in a way that's reasonable on both sides, and you have the ability to set your goals and to talk about it, and then obviously the decisions will be made that you both have to agree on. So in the end, this isn't just about surviving the divorce, it's about redefining your life. So next, let's talk about how the collaborative means you have that support. We did talk about that already, that you're not alone, because collaborative divorce provides support from a legal team. It provides tools to communicate effectively through coaching. And it also helps you make informed decisions because you may have an idea, we'll flush out these ideas. It's a conflict resolution process. And that's key because a lot of people don't have conflict resolution skills. So this has been tried and true and been replicated, and it's very effective and has better outcomes than litigation ever could. So if you're considering divorce or you're already in the process, it's worth exploring. You have more control than you think and more support than you know. So just reach out and look for that support. So that concludes the substance of the presentation. So now we're going to go to the question and, questions and answer time that I discussed earlier. So in looking at the chat, I don't see any questions in the chat. So what I'm going to do is look at the questions that I had that were pre-submitted. And looking at some of the questions, I think one of the questions that I had was, how can I ensure privacy during the divorce? So I did speak on this a little bit earlier. And considering using this collaborative process is one way to ensure privacy because, again, everything happens before anything in court. So it's an out of court process. The court process is the short part of it, only because the court has to be the one to physically grant the divorce. So they have to see you present. But once you have everything written in your contract and you're presenting that to the court, they're not actually going to look through any of your finances and information. They're just going to sign off and make sure it's a legally binding contract. So that's why it's private. So all of the hard work and heavy lifting is done before you get to court. So that part is so it's private, and the court will just issue the divorce order, and your marriage separation agreement will be sealed from the public record. Another area that I didn't actually mention, but I should have in the presentation, was about health insurance. So a lot of the long-term marriages, someone may be on someone's health insurance. So one of the questions is, will I lose access to my spouse's health insurance after a divorce? And yes, oftentimes you will. So depending on your age, you may be eligible for other programs, a COBRA temporarily, but you need to plan for that long-term coverage. And you have to look through and see if you're eligible for Medicare or some type of private insurance. And so that's essential that you start doing the research. Your lawyer is not going to do that, but it is a conversation, at least, of one of the items that you need to think about post-divorce. So it should be a conversation that's worth having. It's super important in making sure that you're going to be okay if you need long-term health care. And if you already have health issues, because sometimes people divorce for health issues, oftentimes divorces are filed by spouses who have a terminally ill spouse or have some ailment that doesn't allow them to function very well. So that's one of the bigger percentages, I would say, in gray divorce, are people that have spouses that are unable to that have some type of healthcare issue. And then also, if you need, like, there's Alzheimer's or dementia, there's just so many ways that can go. So it's important to think about and plan for all those things. Another one is, what happens if my spouse is hiding assets? So with that, transparency is required in divorce. And so even in collaborative, you have to be transparent and identify and clarify all your assets and liabilities. So in contested cases, you may have to hire a forensic accountant or subpoena records, but in collaborative divorce, no, we just require it. So if you're going to come into that process and not do those things, you're not going to be someone in the collaborative process. So this is necessary for everyone to be open and honest and transparent in this process. So I think that's all the questions we have time for. And like I said, this is a great divorce is a topic that I could do more than one video on. So if you in the chat, you want to ask me to do a part 2 or part 3, that'd be great. I will talk more about this, but in the meantime, on my thing, you can see that my social media handles 50 Shades of Law for Facebook, Instagram, and then 50 Shades of Law also on YouTube. And that's where this video will be posted. You can rewatch it if you came in late and you missed it. You can watch it there. And you can also contact me if you want more individualized talk and consultations, and you want me to do an analysis of you want me to represent you. This may be enough for you to think, hey, I think she's someone that could help me. Then you can call that number listed on the screen, 240-499-8569, for anyone that has a hard time reading that, to schedule that consultation. And my website is CL Williams, WILLIAMS law.com. That's CLWilliamslaw.com. So I will see you on my next webinar, and I thank you so much for participating. I really enjoy having these conversations with you. And yes, contact me if you need help with your family law issue. Have a good night.